Right, good evening, everybody. I'll call this meeting of the Budget Committee to order. Ms. Donaldson, would you call the roll, please?
Deacon? Here. Fitzwater? Hensley?
Present.
Kimna?
Here.
Lester?
Fitzwater present.
Schreiber?
Present.
Spencer?
Here.
Spicer? Ward? Here. Wiseman?
Present.
Got
Yep. I see that Mayor Turgeon has also joined us remotely. Good evening, everyone. We will pick up where we left off last meeting with committee discussion of the budget. And I'll open the floor now to any committee members who might have comments to make. Well, then I will share at the outset. I have a few items that are currently on the parking lot. I believe it's 3 police cars and a position within the police department that, for purposes of tonight, I'm going to let sort of expire on the parking lot this evening. We're working on sort of a larger solution for several of these items that is not quite ready for presentation tonight. Unless someone comes up with a grand approach tonight, I'm happy just for those to come off tonight, and we will bring them back up again at a future meeting when we've identified funding for them. It doesn't mean you have to take them off right now. I'm just letting everyone know what my intention is with respect to those items. Does anyone else have any comments? Councilman Spencer.
So for items that are currently being tabulated to be proposed to be spent out of the, what I'm calling the overage of sales tax G, is there a list of those things somewhere like Councilman Lester's proposal? Okay. Okay. Thank you. Sorry. Appreciate you doing that.
Yes.
I'm sorry. I'll repeat again for the people on the phone. Just making it clear that the floor is open for anyone with comments, though we understand that you're at a bit of a speed disadvantage if you are joining us remotely. And a reminder that we will not necessarily sit here for the entire 90 minutes, and I have adjourned meetings after 7 to 12 minutes before in years past.
Yeah,
so,
no, that's.
Councilman Kemna.
No, and I agree with you there. I know that you had sent out an email earlier today. I didn't know, you said that you may not bring that up tonight. Was that going to be something you were going to just hold off on?
Correct. I was not planning to bring that up tonight.
Yeah.
Hey, Mr. Chairman.
Councilman Fitzwater, I believe.
Yeah, I just had a question. It's kind of
Councilman, can you hold on for just a moment while we get your volume up in the room, possibly?
sure.
So make sure we can hear you. Can you try it now?
Yeah, can you hear better now?
A little bit better. Yep. Yeah, just feel free to go ahead and we'll get it going here.
All right, I'll try to speak up. I just had a forward-looking question. I'm sure this question has been answered, but I just want to make sure that I've got everything set as we go through the continuing discussions. I'm just wondering if maybe Sheila could go back through our sales tax projections for the 2023 year. The 1% for the city, our 0.5%, capital improvement tax, the 1% parks tax, which I know parks sends to us, and the 1/4% public safety tax. Now, I know we've talked about using different projections and more conservative, but I'm still trying to figure out why there's such a wide variation in those four numbers, unless they're coming off of different sales numbers. So if you could just clarify it to me one more time as we move forward. And thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Ms. Perry?
So I'd like to start with the parks tax. So all of the sales tax figures that we talk about, the general fund portion of sales tax, as well as the capital improvement tax, parks tax, and public safety tax, for the most part are calculated on the same gross amounts. Parks has slightly different things that it's calculated on, a few less things than the others, but it's not anything substantial. So with the parks revenue, the parks sales tax revenue, Parks makes those calculations. It's whatever the department director deems to be the appropriate number for the parks revenue. Then they base their operating budget off of that number as well. For the general fund, I would typically look at historical data and do some analysis, and that is the figure that we have built into the general fund revenue that we've talked about is not as conservative as it has been in the past. For the capital improvement tax and for the public safety tax, those numbers are budgeted based on what we said the projected revenues were at the time that those were put out to a vote of the people. So on the capital improvement tax, it's based on 5.6 million on an annual basis. On the front end and the back end, there are 6-month periods, and so it would be based on half that number. And the public safety tax is the same way. It is actually based on the revenue that we have been using for all of our projections, which is $2.8 million. So again, that is half of the capital improvement number because capital improvement is a 0.5% sales tax. Public safety is a 1/4% sales tax. So your capital improvement and your public safety numbers are based on the same figures essentially, and they should fit into the methodology. But the general revenue, we have tried to kind of budget that in a manner that goes along with projections, some assumptions, and again, we've spoken during this budget cycle about the fact that it's less conservative than has previously been used. Is that what you're looking for, Councilman Fitzwater?
Yes, are we locked into having to use those numbers that were in the original projections since the world has changed in the last, since the taxes were put on the ballot?
You are not locked into those numbers. I assume you're talking about going with a higher projection. You're not locked into those numbers, but what I would strongly caution against is making big modifications to those numbers in the early onset of your 5-year iteration, because you could be looking at years 1 and 2, or half of the first year and then the full second year, where your revenues are coming in higher due to a wide variety of factors, the amount of federal money that's been put into the economy, the inflation factor, and that could level off in the 3rd year. So if you're being aggressive in your first couple of years and then you don't meet the mark in the 3rd, 4th, and 5th year, you run into a budgetary issue. So we have always tended to be conservative with those numbers and dealt then with any accumulated funds at the end of the iteration.
Okay, well, I appreciate your discussion, and I think that matches what you've told us in the past. I guess my comment would be, and then I'll wrap up, is we've got bumpers on both sides of the 1%, which has a much larger, or obviously it's twice what those taxes are, so it ought to be a number at least double. We've got on the other side the parks tax. And then we've got R2 kind of wedged a little bit lower, and with all the discussions we're having on needs with both public safety and probably to a lesser extent, short term on public works projects, but as we've discussed over the last, or I guess we began the discussion at the last meeting, that we have ongoing needs if we can take care of those. I agree with you that we don't want to get too aggressive, but if we're holding ourselves back on being able to provide things for public safety or for any of the categories that fall under the capital improvement sales tax, I'd just like to make sure that we aren't going through this aggressive gleaning process again in 5 years. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilman Lester, did you have a comment?
I was just wondering what the basis for the projection is. Is it 3-year trend or some other method? And do you know what the difference is between the general and the parks, or sales tax H in the parks?
I don't know the difference between the two offhand. I can look that up and send an email on it. As far as trends go, or the analysis that I use, I kind of look at 1 year, 3 year, 5 year, 10 year even, and we kind of make determinations based on where those trend analyses are falling. Right now, what we have built into the current budget is a 1.32% increase on the anticipated FY22 actuals. It would be a 5.92% increase on the FY21 actuals. And if you kind of compare that to what the state's consensus estimates are for 23, the state has a 3.95% increase on their FY22 budget. So where they're doing 3.95, we're doing 1.32. So we're still staying below the state's trend as well.
Okay.
And I think just today, the city administrator provided a budget letter that was used for the city of Columbia. I didn't send that to everybody. Okay, but it is something that we can probably access and look up. They're having the same trends as we are in sales tax as well.
Councilman Spencer.
And I don't know if this is what Councilman Lester was alluding to as far as the difference between the parks and half-cent sales tax versus our half-cent capital improvement sales tax. But do you know what they use to establish their trends, or I guess, Chris, could you maybe answer that for us? Sorry.
We just look back the last few years and trends based on that and project.
Not use any other outside data that you might have access to that.
It's possible Andrew and our department, the finance guy, would be able to answer that specific question. I don't know if he uses anything outside, but we typically look at a broad picture and estimate based on month over month change the last 36.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you very much. Councilman Deacon.
Yeah,
Excuse me, I can understand Columbia have a strong projection, because every one of the universities over there has had a higher enrollment, and that brings a lot of expendable money, discretionary money for the students, so I get a little nervous. I don't see us growing. I'd rather have a little bit at the end than think, oh my gosh. The things are in a little bit of a good part, but I'm uncomfortable the next next year and a half economically. I just don't want us to get us in a bind. But I hate like heck to get us to have $4 million that we should have spent on our roads. So I'm new to this, but I'm just listening. I would love to have some good direction.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilman Fitzwater.
Yeah, I was just gonna point out that I believe if I'm looking at the right number, Parks projected 6.1 million on page 290 of the budget. So I agree wholeheartedly with Councilman Deacon, but $500,000 seems like a fairly large range. So I just bring it up. I know we're having a tough time, and I'm not advocating spending it quickly, but maybe a little more aggressively than we've done this time.
Okay. Any comments from the rest of the committee or anyone else in the room? Councilman Kemner.
What's our projection for sales tax age? As far as what we'll bring in?
It is at $5.6 million for each of the 5 years.
Okay.
Thank you. Anyone else? Comments, questions? I might take this opportunity to ask if there's anyone here to make a public comment tonight, but I think I know the answer to that already, because, well, judging by the ratio of people and occupied microphones in the room, it's anyone else? Comments, questions? I will also say that it's my goal for this Thursday night to have a more fully formed plan to propose that would cover a handful of priority items, but not quite ready this evening with that. So, any other comments, questions? Well, if no one has anything else, I will remind everyone that our next meeting is this Thursday night at 5:30 p.m. in this room. That's September 1st. Councilman Lester.
Yes, can you just review the process somewhat as far as getting it on the funding onto the table, and then how long it stays there, and
Sure. What we were
eventually determination of we're going to do that or not. So
Yeah. So what we were looking at a little while ago, the spreadsheet is what, long before my time, was nicknamed the parking lot, and it's a pretty loose process. We come with proposals. You don't necessarily have to have offsetting funding in order to propose a new spending item, but once you put it on the parking lot, the tradition has been that by the end of the next meeting, you should have funding to propose to offset your proposed new spending item, or else it essentially falls off the parking lot at that time. It doesn't mean that you can't bring it back at the next meeting. Hopefully, at that point, you might have some funding to propose, but it's just a way to keep things moving. So, if you have priority items that you're having a hard time finding funding for, you might just want to keep your own list of those so that they don't get lost if they happen to slide off the parking lot a time or two. But what we will do is, if you have funding or if someone else has funding to propose to offset in order to pay for your new spending item, we can field those just like we did the last meeting for the cleanup item for the Parks Golf Course item. We can propose to amend what's currently in the proposed budget by making changes and identifying the new spending item, the offsetting source of the revenue, or perhaps what to do with surplus revenue if the change that you want to make for some reason would result in a surplus revenue situation. So it's pretty loose.
okay, so anything that's not identified as funding get dropped off after this meeting from the first meeting or not?
That's been the tradition.
Okay.
If it's not met with funding this evening,
And
but
of course,
it-
anything proposed to get finalized requires a vote.
correct. Yeah, any change to the current proposed budget requires a majority vote. Councilman Spencer.
This is probably a question also for Steve, is when are we gonna hear from, Evergreen with the salary information?
I don't know, Gail, do you have any update on the timing? I know they're working on some pieces of that.
Yeah, I know they're working on a lot of it, and tentatively, we're trying to get to the next council meeting, which is next Tuesday. I just don't know yet if that's gonna happen or not. But that's the goal that we've set.
Yeah, I just think that's a critical piece of information that we're really gonna have to have before us, before we can, you know, probably have a final vote. You know, so, or at least that's my feeling.
So a final number as to additional salary increases?
That, along with, I'm sure they're gonna have a compression piece with that, and probably you know, a number, a funding number that's gonna need to be addressed.
Yeah, and it's that type of information that we're expecting or hoping to have by the next meeting?
I hope.
Or at least this fall sometime?
That's what we're hoping for, yes.
Wouldn't that be terrific? Great. All the numbers are now dancing around in my head, and it's gonna be a lot of fun. Anyone else, comments, questions for this evening? Going once, going twice? Nope, we'll see everybody back here Thursday night, 5:30 PM. We're adjourned. Thank you.